What's up, Buck?
Nothing much, man, you know?
Thanks for coming on the podcast. Where's the name Buck come from?
It was an old army nickname that I got when I was just a private, and then it stuck forever. And for even a long time in my career, people didn't know what my real name was. Like I had like award write-ups that would just say like Sergeant Buck, and I was like, it's not my real name, actually. They're like, what? And I was like, but everybody calls you that. I was like, yeah, I know, it's crazy, but that's a nickname. So I
Yeah.
just kept it, you know.
I was listening to an interview before this that you did, and you said, I don't think of myself as a writer. I'm just Buck. And I kind of appreciated that.
Yeah, I kind of the Instagram handle like was a joke for like a really long time. And then like as my writing career grew and like I became more popular, like you know how it is. Like when you're a writer, like people always like to compare you to like other writers because it's just a natural thing people do. And I was like, nah, dude, I'm just Buck, dude.
I love
Just a
that. I
plain
love
old
that.
guy.
Yeah. Can you think of any writers off the top of your head who people have compared you to?
I get Bukowski a lot.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
yeah, I get Bukowski's my main one. People compare me to a lot. And then like I get sent a lot of like Hemingway stuff, too, just because I travel and I adventure and I'm friends with like the family and stuff. But I'm always feel like super weird about that because I am friends with the family.
With the
So
Hemingway family.
yeah, me and his great grandson Patrick are like pretty close friends. We went to Africa together last November to go safari hunting, and we've been friends for damn near like 5 years now. So
Oh, that's cool. So, do you do a lot of adventuring in your life?
oh yeah, I last March. So I got out of the army in September, and then I didn't really have a lot going on, so I decided to go backpack around the world for like 6 months.
Awesome.
Did like six continents. I don't even know how many countries. 21 different flights. I was living in Vietnam for like a month and a half. Pretty much did it all. So yeah, I've been. I honestly have no idea how many countries I've been to, but it's a lot.
What's your on that backpacking trip? What is like a standout favorite memory that you have?
Definitely the safari hunting is like hard to beat. Like I've always loved Africa more than anything, and like safari hunting is like one of those like it's one of those things every dude wants to do at least once in his life. And it's hard to top like just being out there on the green hills of Africa, just hunting kudu and springbok and antelope and impala. That's uh that's a wild experience. It's an expensive hobby, which sucks, but it's fun. It's probably the most fun you could have. And then surfing in Bali was fun. I don't really like Bali as a whole. It's very dirty. It's very influencer. Basically, people are just trying to get the best Instagram shot. But I surfed like the biggest wave of my life out there, so that was cool.
Nice, nice. So you mentioned you got out of the army in September. Congratulations and thank you for your service, by the way. Um, how
Uh,
long how long were you in for?
I was in for 11 long years of my life.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
what position or what rank were you holding?
So I was a staff sergeant when I got out, but when I got medically retired, so they retired me as an E7, so sergeant first class, which I thought was real nice of them, but I never wore the rank a day in my life, so so I don't like to count it, but on paperwork it says E7. So
Yeah, nice. And you were writing while you were still in the service, correct?
yep, wrote my first book. I actually started writing it when I was like 23. And then I didn't get it published until 2021 just because you don't really know what you're doing. It's just when you start writing and you don't really ever think it's gonna go anywhere. You don't think you're good enough, a lot of self-doubts. Finding a publisher is like a whole different thing. And then it finally happens, and then I was like, okay, well, I guess that book did okay. I have like some leftover stuff I could probably work on. And then yeah, I wrote the most recent one, Demons in the Taillights. I finished that in the summer of 2022, and it came out this past March. Yeah, March, I think.
So have you done two books?
Two books. Yep. It publishing takes a while, so like by the time someone like finishes writing their first draft, it's usually going to take about a year to 2 years to you actually gets on a shelf and it's done.
Oh
Uh,
wow. Long
yeah,
time.
it takes a yeah. So I'm doing rewrites for my third book right now, like this whole month, and then first draft has been completed. We're doing rewrites right now, and then that'll probably be out sometime next year. And then in October, I sit down to start writing my fourth book. So.
Amazing, amazing. And your first book was a poetry book, right?
hmm
And then the second book is a fiction?
it's a weird collection of like poetry with like some journal entries. I kind of want it to be like a journal. I always label my stuff as fiction just because it's easier, I think, because it's like I always write whether I'm doing short stories or like I'm working on like novel projects. Like it's all based on my own experiences on life,
Mhm.
and I always call it like 75% truth, 25% bullshit.
How long have you been writing for?
Ah, God, that's a God, since I was probably a kid, I used to ride the bus and I would just write little short stories while I was riding the bus just to pass the time. But professionally, I guess professionally is like a rough word. I didn't start getting like paid for it until I was probably like 25, 26. So about like 5 years now.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, if you could go back and talk to yourself as a kid, what advice would you give yourself now to your younger self, either about writing or about anything?
Uh, I don't know. I don't think I would change anything really. I think it
Yeah.
all kind of worked out. Like I had more books out now, like, you know, uh, but I was too busy like living life to ever take writing too seriously when I was younger, and like I was active duty, so like I had like a pretty good paycheck coming in. Now is like the first time in my life where it's like books are my only form of income, so I'm like, dang, I really need to like I actually have to sit down and finish these books now. But
Yeah.
I had a blast. I think I did it everything my own way, and the only thing I would tell my younger private self is like, don't blow all your deployment money every single time. Like maybe save a little bit, you know.
Yeah. That's good advice.
That's cool.
So what was your writing process like when you wrote your first book? Can you talk about like how you got started or for someone listening who wants to write something but just struggling to get started, can you talk about your process a little bit?
My process has changed with probably every single book I wrote. Uh, so like my first one, I was just doing the classic. I think how everybody writes their first book, just a lot of alcohol, a lot of depression, and just putting down stuff on paper and hoping it works out at the end. Second one, I took it a little bit more seriously. Did a lot of editing for the second one. And nowadays, my writing process is wildly boring. I wake up every morning, I let the dog out, I go for a run, I make coffee, I sit down and I write from, today's Tuesday, I'll write from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and then I'll go to the gym, have dinner, go for a run again, and then read, and then I drink, and then go to bed.
That sounds like a pretty good day.
Yeah, it is a pretty great day. I always tell people it's like the greatest job you can have if you can make money doing it.
Yeah. So you're writing sounds like you're writing about 4 hours a day. Typically, like how much progress can you make in that time?
You can never put it. Some days I'll bang out 10 pages, and some days I'll be lucky if I finish a page.
Right.
So it's just the only days I don't write is during the weekends, and like so right now, like I'm not really working on anything new. It's mostly just rewrites. So it's like going back through like every sentence and trying to figure out if I could make it better, and then just trying to make it easier on my editor. And like I have buddies that write professionally too, and I'll send like one buddies, I send him my work. He looks over it. He's like, this could be better. This could be better. Change this, change that. Basic rules of grammar. Stop trying to reinvent your shit. And that's really it. And so basically, rewrites are going to be the next 2 weeks. Then after that, it goes off to the editor, and then we'll see what he says.
What kind of, you mentioned you're reading at night. What kind of stuff are you reading?
I read a lot of trash fiction. Like I don't really read a lot of like modern stuff. I feel like a lot of like modern books that are written is just like some male self-help, David Goggins bullshit, and I think that's lame, you know? I just read a lot of like old beach reads like Wilbur Smith, Clive Cussler. I read some Kenneth Patchen, but that's like some really obscure stuff that I wouldn't recommend to people. Uh, and then, yeah, that's pretty much it right now. What I read. Christopher Buehlman is another book I read. He has this really cool like it's like a horror fiction stuff. He has this like super cool like World War I like werewolf book, which is super. That sounds stupid, but it's actually super awesome.
Okay, I'll check that out. Sounds cool.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned that alcohol was involved quite a bit in your first book that you wrote. Do you feel like alcohol helps? Like, in what way do you think that affects or helps the creative process?
Nowadays, I don't think it helps me. But I'm also like 30. I was like 23 when I was writing my first book, so I could just slug gin all night and be fine. Nowadays, I like to get up early and treat it more like a job. If I if I tie one off like too much, I'm not doing anything for like the next 2 days. And like in a job where you don't really have a boss, it's kind of like sets you back a lot.
Hmm.
So yeah, it doesn't really help as much as it used to. Like there are times like when I'm up late at night, I'm having my nightcaps and I'm listening to music and I'll be like, man, that's just a good idea, you know, and I'll write it down. I'll go look at it the next day. But honestly, I get more ideas for my writing now when I go run,
Hmm.
which is crazy. I'll like stop my run or like be writing stuff down on my notes app. You know, it's just it changes every time. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend drinking as much once you take it more seriously because drunk people can't write very well, man. It's not the best. Like that old Hemingway quote where it's like write drunk, edit sober. He never even said that. Like he never did that ever. Like that's like he took writing way too seriously to for it to be like something you do absolutely intoxicated.
Maybe when you were younger, it helped like with confidence. Like for me, for example,
Yeah,
when I started doing the podcast, I had to like get over the hump of like just putting something out into the world, with my
yeah,
face and
yeah.
my voice on it. So I wonder if the alcohol kind of helped like did you have any, I don't know if everyone gets that, like, oh God, I'm gonna put something out into the world and everyone's gonna like read it and have an opinion. Like, do you let that affect you at all?
Not really. I mean, like, I think it's impossible to go through the process and like just not care at all. But I've rarely ever cared too much about what people think about my work. Because at the end of the day, it's my work. I mean, obviously, like money's cool, and you need to make money like to keep doing this career. Uh, but I mean, I've gotten pretty much good reviews all around for all my work. So whatever. I've gotten some like bad reviews, but I never really take them too seriously. I think like most of the people with bad reviews I get, they think it's going to be like some military publication, and it's not at all. So so that's
Mhm.
on them.
Yeah. So it's called Sober Man's Thoughts, but alcohol was greatly involved in the writing process. So how's that work? Why is it called that?
A drunk man's words are a sober man's thoughts. I thought that was like a super common phrase. Yeah, actually, some people were really pissed. They bought that book thinking this thing about sobriety. I was like, I thought that was a common phrase. My bad. I thought everybody knew that.
Oh,
So
okay,
yeah,
I get it. I like that though. I don't think I've ever actually heard that phrase, but
I wish
now
I would
that,
have told people I came up with it.
yeah,
You-
yeah. So, and what's the next book? Demons in the Taillights? Can you talk
Yeah,
about
so
that a little
Demons in
bit?
the Taillights. That's my most recent work. I like that one a little bit more. Uh, Basically, I just wrote it about putting your past behind you, like kind of putting your demons in the taillights, like going on, getting through everything. Like I wrote it at I like was working too many hours at work. You know, I was an army instructor, and like that's a terrible job to have. Like working damn close to 18-hour days sometimes, and you get to be there before the students. You're there after the students. Like I got out of a bad breakup, and then like I was just kind of like drinking too much, kind of just really not happy. And yeah, I was experimenting a lot with like psychedelic drugs and doing a whole bunch of wild stuff. And yeah, I just started to write this book and just kind of like journaling my process of trying to put my bullshit behind and like, just get back to being normal, getting back on track. And this book kind of came out of it. It was originally like 310 pages long, and I cut it down to like, I think it's like 260 now. A lot of editing. The whole editing process took like close to 2 years,
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I really like that book, and it's not like I don't think it'll ever be anyone's favorite. It's not my favorite, but it's something I'm really proud of. Like I did a lot of like different creative leaps with that. Did a lot of obscure stuff. I mean, it's hard to find like out of 260 poems or pages of that book, not everything's going to be perfect, and you have to understand that poetry collections are never going to be like that. But it's for you can get as many gems as you can in a poetry collection. I think that's what makes it good. Um, and that's just what I tried to do. And yeah, I try to make it like this big, long chronicle journey of a man's journey to put some bullshit behind, put his demons in the
Okay.
tank.
Cool. So you mentioned you taking some creative leaps on it. Like, so you mean like creative risks? Like, what kind of
Oh yeah,
like,
like I think
can
I was
you
listening.
just like, what do you mean? Can you describe some of those?
Just writing some really crazy, obscure poems. I don't know. I always like I'm a big like rock and roll guy, big grunge guy. Like I used to be in a band like before I was in the army, and I always like took a lot of inspiration from like Zeppelin, Nirvana, all that stuff, and I try to want to do like some poetry kind of in that like obscure lyrical style.
Yeah.
And I was able to do it a couple times. I don't know if it, like anyone ever thinks it's great. I think it's okay. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of weird symbolism, a lot of very obscure lyrics, just some of it sounding like absolute nonsense, and that's kind of what I was going for. Just very different from my first book, like probably night and day difference.
And before you got into the writing, you said you were experimenting with some psychedelics.
Oh man, I was on psychedelics when I wrote most of it, man.
Okay,
Like,
so I just sort of sort this. Book one is kind of more alcohol fueled. Book two is like more psychedelic fueled.
yeah, mostly just yeah,
Do you,
mushrooms and cocaine.
mushrooms and cocaine.
I'm out of
Wow.
the army now, so I can be completely honest about it.
I think the honesty is the way to go. And I
Yeah,
think, when you're authentic and honest about your process, it makes the books like I'm more interested to check it out. Not because you were on a substance when you wrote it, but just because you're completely authentic about your process. And it makes you
yeah,
like
man.
you personally more interesting. This is
Yeah, it
why
was
like
pretty nuts. Like, dude, I'd be up to like 3 a.m. just blasted out of my mind, just playing like, I have like a very instant. I have like 300 records, like this giant record collection. And I'd just be playing like Zeppelin one, Black Sabbath, and just writing. I had this dry erase marker. I'd be writing on the walls of my shower and shit. Like it was crazy. Like I'm very surprised I even survived finishing that book. It was nuts.
that
And like even looking through it, like my publisher was like, "This is fucking out there, man." I was like, "Yeah." And then, but I mean, I will say that I think that was just like a phase I was going through in my life. Like man, dude, it was a lot. I
it
pretty much tried everything from like ketamine to mushrooms to LSD. I was ripping lines in my living room and just writing this book, and I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it for anybody. Actually, never do
yeah,
that.
we'll put a disclaimer on the intro to this. It's giving me like fear and loathing in Las Vegas vibes. Like you're just
Yeah,
like the
I
artist,
think
writer. What just curious, like are you just kind of like an artist who's experimenting with things, or like what drew you to kind of want to
I
take
don't
so
know,
many
man.
things? Don't
I don't know.
know.
I think I'm just naturally. I'm naturally. I like to drink. I drink a lot. I have a pretty high tolerance for alcohol. And I think it was just I always looked up to like those great artists like Burroughs and Thompson, Henry Miller too, like the Kerouac gang, and they were just super fucked up, and they wrote these like crazy books, and I was like, like I feel like naturally if you're like a male author, you're gonna go down that rabbit hole. You gotta try it at least once. You gotta see what it's all about, and then you do it, and like I always see veterans like really talk about like this psychedelic like PTSD treatment. And I'll be real with you, man. Like I don't think that's a good idea. I think it's a really bad idea. I've done a
Yeah.
lot of psychedelics, and I tell you, there is nothing like the fear of just experiencing the worst days of your life over just while you're zapped out of your mind in your apartment. Like it never made me feel better at all. Not one time. It was super fun when you start doing like those type of stuff, and then the more and more you do them, and the higher and higher your tolerance gets. Like, dude, I was busting like 12 grams of mushrooms and just slugging gin, drinking
Whoa.
like a case of beer and just writing. And I was like, man, dude, I'm actually feel way more depressed. So yeah, now I don't do any of that. I just drink coffee and like maybe have a glass of gin at night.
Yeah, I do tell people if someone confides in me about getting depressed, I do recommend cutting the alcohol
Yeah,
if you're getting low.
it's crazy. Just like I'm not saying I don't think you need to go complete sobriety. I think you could have a healthy relationship with alcohol without quitting it completely. And my big thing is I just went to therapy for like a year and a half, and my therapist was just like, "Oh no, you just feel like what every other 28-year-old who's like gone through combat experience is feeling. Like this is natural. Like your brain's not even done developing." She's like, "You probably just need to like lay off the drugs and stop drinking so much." And I was like, "Damn, crazy concept. Who knew?" and then I
Year
did
and a
it. And I was
half of
like, "Oh,
therapy, and we got the breakthrough finally.
yeah, we got the breakthrough." And they're like, "No, you're normal actually." And I was like, "Oh." Because you kind of want to, when you're that depressed and you're being that eccentric and you're writing all the time, you want somebody to sit down and tell you you're special. And at the end of the day, you're just Buck, dude. You're just a normal weirdo
You're
who
just
probably just
Buck.
tipped over the scales a little bit too much. And yeah, but I'm glad I did it. Glad I went through it.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that you were in a band. What kind of music you were you playing?
I was in a punk rock band. We were called
Nice.
Pipeline, and
Cool.
I was the drummer. We didn't
Okay.
make it, so I joined the army.
I I just had Stan Lake on the podcast. He's a writer. He's with Dead
Yeah, I
Reckoning
know
as well,
Stan.
actually. And we got to talking about hardcore bands last time he was on the
Yeah, he was like
podcast.
in bands that actually like made records and shit.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. You like some of the heavier side of music too?
not really. I mean, I used to like. I love the Melvins, which is like a really obscure grunge band. It was like Cobain's favorite band. He
Yeah.
actually had a producer credit on their first album, um, but he never really played in it. He actually got kicked out of the band. It's kind of a funny story on that. But now, honestly, man, nowadays I'm listening to a lot of Steely Dan, a lot of Rolling Stones, a lot of '70s like rock and roll. I used to really like the hardcore stuff, like Slayer, and but now I don't know, I'm 30. It's not really cool. Like I'm not really punk rock anymore. So
Yeah, you start to
I have a
calm down.
mortgage. I pay taxes, man. Like there's
Yeah,
nothing punk rock about me.
you hit 30, you get a mortgage, it all starts to just kind of calm down and
Yeah. So yeah,
yeah.
Steely Dan's more what I like, what my speed of music nowadays.
Speaking of Nirvana, this is a little off topic, but I thought of it because you mentioned Nirvana. I was at a tattoo shop the other week, and there was a guy in there who had my opinion, the best neck tattoo ever, and it was a cover up. And do you remember the Nirvana logo, but it said Nevermind, but it was like kind of wavy?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So he had the Nevermind logo as a cover up over his ex girlfriend's name, and
That's pretty great, actually. If you're
I
gonna do a neck tattoo, that's a good one to get.
I thought that was pretty good too. And like the girl's name, like it was still kind of hanging out a little bit from under the Nevermind. So I thought that was, if you're gonna go with neck tattoo and you're gonna go with a neck tattoo cover up, the Nirvana Nevermind is pretty,
That's a great album. You
yeah,
know,
it's pretty good.
Oddly enough, I was actually born the day Kurt Cobain died.
Whoa, what day is that?
Exact same day, April 5th, '94.
Oh, no way. Wow.
Yeah, pass each
Maybe
other on the way in and out.
exactly. Yeah. I was like, maybe you guys bumped shoulders on the way in.
Yeah, it was super funny. Yeah, and my dad was like a really big like grunge guy and stuff too. Like he met Lane Staley,
Mm,
which Lane Staley also died April 5th. So that's like a weird thing.
whoa.
Yeah.
That is weird. So so for anyone out there listening that wants to get into writing, like, can you recommend, like, is there like an education track? Should they take a class? Should they read a book? Should they just read fiction books and get inspired? Or what do you recommend to
Man,
someone
that's
who,
always like a hard one
yeah,
with people. Like, I mean, I'm a college dropout. I know that. there was no real formal education on the whole process for me, but I will say that I'm constantly learning stuff every day from writing. Like there are some basic rules of English you need to know. And no matter how many times I've written hundreds of thousands of words in my life for articles, books, whatever, and to this day, I still send it out to somebody to look at to make sure that I'm not stupid, you know? I don't know. It's like all depends on what you want to write. Like, if you want to write like nonfiction, like memoir style stuff, take an English 101 class and maybe, learn basic story setup and then just do that. If you want to write fiction, you can kind of bend the rules a little bit, but not too much. I don't know, just read. But if you really want to, like, in my opinion, if you want to write like a really great book, like every guy I know who writes great stories has a really interesting life. Like
Hmm.
my buddy Douglas Hoover, he's probably like one of my favorite living authors out there right now. He's a great friend. That guy's a really interesting life. Marine Corps veteran, lived down in South Florida, living like an awesome, wild life. Then went and got his master's degree at Emerson, and now he like runs a farm out in rural Maine. And that dude can write his face off. He's probably like one of the most intelligent men I've ever met. And I don't think, and I read all his books and I know him a lot personally. Like, I don't think he could have written that book if he was just some dude who got an undergrad at 21 and then got his MFA at 24 and then just sits in an office and writes books. Like I've read a lot of books like that by people with that background, and they usually suck. You need a little bit of life experience to write a good book, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. There was a documentary about a Hollywood writer named Nora Ephron, and the documentary was called Everything is Copy. And the idea was like everything in her life was copy, like she could write about it. And they said that in her life, even people that were close with her started to like not want to talk about stuff because like everything that she absorbed in her life would end up somehow like in one of her stories.
Yeah, I think that's natural. I do that literally all the time. I there's something I always try to do, like male characters in my books. I try to take names from my friends, kind of
Mhm.
like also like give my friends like a little bit of immortality type of thing. But also like it's kind of hard to come up with male names you haven't really like heard them. And then like
Yeah.
with females names, it's usually nicknames of ex-girlfriends or something like that because fuck them.
I do agree on the name thing though. It's like if you take someone's name, it seems to work. Like if you use someone's name, then if you try to make the name up, you're just like, ah, that sounds fake. It doesn't sound like a real
Exactly.
name. It's like I don't know how that works, but it seems that way.
Yeah, I think it's kind of almost impossible for you to like. There's nothing truly original left in this world. Like nothing's been original for a very, very long time. Uh, so when you look at it that way, it is fiction. Like I could come up with a title today of a story, and then I could Google that title, and somebody is probably in the history of mankind has published a book under that name. So what do? You either try to rack your brain over and over again, trying to come up with this truly original story, this truly original title, or you just write it better than the last person did. And if it's not, who cares? At the end of the day, just write your story. If it interferes with one thing or it sounds too much like another stuff, like who cares anymore? I think anything that's not a re-release or a reboot or some 30-year-old sequel, I think anyone's gonna be a breath of fresh air at this time in their lives.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned to be a better writer to have an interesting life. And I agree with that. I have a couple thoughts on that, but I think that also ties in with in 2024, like marketing and like social media presence seems to be very important. So I'm curious if you have an opinion about marketing, if you have an approach to marketing. But I also think that being having an interesting life probably make you a much better writer. But in 2024, it probably brings more attention to your writing as well.
Marketing is something I still have not figured out to this day. I mean, Instagram used to be really great for marketing. Used to be really cool. But I've always just tried to be very authentic with who I am and what I do. Like at the end of the day, I'm just Buck. I'm just a dude like if I wasn't a writer, I would still be living the way I live my life. I just so happened to stumble into a career field that one I love, and two, it kind of helps me. Um, so I don't really know. I mean, I've tried Instagram, I've done the reels, I've done the ads, and I really never saw that much of different engagement. I would sell more books off of making, a stupid reel just on me on vacation doing something ridiculous. If you're like, oh man, this guy's like kind of cool. Let's see what this book's about. And I sell more books at bars when I'm just sitting there and I'm talking to people because it's the big question. What do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm an author. They're like, oh, that's actually pretty interesting. And I'm like, yeah, it's the best job you can have, honestly. And then I sit there and I talk to them for like 20 minutes to an hour, and I usually sell a book that way. And I've been doing that for the past, couple years, and it works pretty great.
Yeah, nice, nice. Do you have any thoughts or opinions, especially for the people listening out there, on self-publishing versus finding a publisher?
Well, I tell you one, it depends on what you want to do. I have friends who, you know, self-publish books, and they do pretty well. But in my opinion, I think if you're want to be a serious writer, you have to go through a publisher. Because if you've never had anyone tell you that your work is bad and you've never been rejected once in your life, then you probably don't really understand what it goes through to be a writer. Like, I could write a book today. I could probably write 20 pages. I could publish it, send it to Amazon direct publisher, and it could go out there and it could be okay. But if I was to go through an editor and I get a second opinion, get a third opinion, do some rewrites, have someone tell me some ideas are bad, have a second opinion, and then have the legitimacy of a publisher put a stamp on your book and say, I did you good, go out and prosper. And also, they do a little bit of marketing and stuff like that. So you're going to get a cut, but I always tell people that traditional publishing is the best, even if you do it through a micro publisher. Like, I know guys who write who have created their own micro publisher, and that is very cool, you know. But those guys, it's only one guy I know who does this, and he's probably one of the greatest writers I've ever met. But he's also highly intelligent, and he has discipline enough to go through his work and be honest. And he has people that send out like for beta reading and stuff like that. That's the exception to the rule. That is the only person I'll ever say that like probably doesn't need a traditional publisher because he can do it all on his own. 90% of people, if you self-publish, I kind of think you're a joke, in my opinion. Which I know is
Yeah,
gonna be, you're gonna think I'm fucked up for that, but it's my opinion, so who cares?
yeah, I appreciate the authenticity. Um, I think some people really like they want to self-publish because they think they'll make more money. They get to keep a bigger cut. But I think that having a publisher brings like some legitimacy, or at least the optics of legitimacy. Like for example, like I feel better on my podcast episodes when I put in the description like a coupon code, like this episode
Exactly.
is sponsored by blah blah blah. Like it feels a little bit more legit.
Yeah. You're not just some dude in his basement with a microphone,
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Which I'm only like one step away from that, but
yeah, I mean, that's the way I kind of look at it. Like, I don't have like one of the big five publishers. Dead Reckoning's a micro publisher, which is great. I think it's a great way to like. I'm super thankful for them giving me my start. I love working with them, and but if whenever I finish writing my novel, like I'm gonna take the big leap of faith and send it out to agents and try to get the big book deals because like the only way to make money in writing is you gotta get your book turned into a movie. That's it, man.
that's what I was
Like,
gonna say. Get the book deal and get the big movie deal.
yeah, dude, I want nice things, dude. I have expensive taste. Safari hunting's not a cheap hobby. It's expensive. I want to pay for that. I don't want to get a real job.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just always tell people like if you're gonna do it, like, and if you don't, if you have a good job and you just want to do writing on the side and self-publish books, like, yeah, that's cool. But don't sit there and cry when you're like, oh, well, no one buys my books. I'm like, yeah, dude, no one fucking knows who you are. Like, you can do
Yeah.
all the podcasts you want. You can pay for all the Instagram ads you ever had in your life, but no one's gonna take your shit seriously ever.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, I was also thinking about what you said about having an interesting life and how it makes you a better writer. I don't know if I talk to a lot of people, like a lot of my friends are kind of like aspiring writers or aspiring artists. I'm out here in LA, so like a lot of kind of aspiring movie people, and a lot of people are freaking out right now about AI taking all of our
Yeah.
jobs. I'm curious your opinion about that, but I want to say a little bit my opinion because it kind of ties into having an interesting life. Where I have this thought about AI that I haven't heard anyone else say yet, and that's basically a lot of the art that I consume, whether it's a book or a movie or a tattoo or whatever, I find it really interesting because even if I don't know the person personally, that human being is interesting to me. And I know that even though we maybe have totally different lives, like we probably have gone through similar things. Whereas if you took the same piece of art and said a computer made this, I would instantly not care about it. Even if it was the most, you could show me the Mona Lisa and then I would find it interesting. And then if you told me a computer made it, I would instantly be like, nah, I don't really care. Because when I know that a human made it who's like had problems and ups and downs and taken 12 grams of mushrooms and like done all these things, it's way more interesting to me. So I don't know if you have any thoughts or opinions about that.
Yeah. I mean, I tell you, like, I think if you're worried about AI taking your job, you're probably a bad artist, like, in my opinion. Uh, I'm never once worried about AI. Because I think in reality of the world, we have probably seen a movie with a completely AI written script that a human has edited. I believe it. There's probably a lot of Amazon produced movies that are completely AI written scripts, even though they won't tell us. I know it's happened. They're trying to test it out to see if it works, but you can't, man. It's like there's this great movie with Bradley Cooper called The Words, right? Basically, he finds this book in like Paris and like he publishes it under his own name, but like actually this dude wrote it when he was living in Paris and all this stuff. And like the book's wildly successful. The old man tracks him down. There's one line in it. He's like, the problem is, he's like, you can't tell me what the wine tastes like in Paris. You can't tell me what it's like to hear your child crying in there because it's dying and it's sick. You can't tell me that because you haven't fucking lived it. He says, that's what's bothered me. He's like, I don't want any credit for this book, but I want you to know that you're a fraud. And that's kind of the way I look at AI. You know, because the descriptions are off. You can tell when someone's written a book about a subject they don't fully know about, where they can't describe you things perfectly. And anyone who's actually been there in that scenario can tell you, and you can tell, like, it's not authentic, it's not real. Like, I could write a book about, farming. I've never been a farmer a day in my life, but I could do enough research and probably write it mostly decent. But I'm never going to get things perfect. Never once in my life am I going to get it perfect. Uh, so why would I write a book like that? Or I could write a book about a man backpacking, traveling, well, dealing with his own problems and like thinking about this, talking to girls, trying to the same troubles that every young man goes through. I can write that because I have been that young man. And with AI, there's no soul in any of it. And no matter how good they make it, I don't think it's ever going to really take off. And at the end of the day, like, same thing. When I see a movie that I really like, I look up who wrote the script and I look up what else they've done because I want to see more of their work and I want to find out a little about the person. And if they're an interesting person, I'm even more interested in their work. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not worried about it at all. If you are worried about it, then maybe you should find a new profession.
Yeah, well said. I'm not worried about it either. And um so I've played around with it too, and I agree, like it's just not that good. And when you read it, you know that it's not made by a human. And like for example, this podcast, if you've listened to older episodes, we used to do something called the hypothetical survival scenario, which
Mhm.
was it was like a game show with 10 A or B questions to see if you can survive the podcast. So for example, it would be like you've crash landed on a deserted island. Do you A, search for food, or B, make a signal fire? And so we used to do that on the podcast. It was a lot of fun. And I used AI, Chat GPT, to make a couple of the scenarios. And every time it spits one out, you have to change it. You have to redo it because it's just like completely a computer. Like it's like you have crashed. Do you get out of the plane or not get out of the plane? and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
So it's just like not as good as people make it
Yeah,
out to
and I
be.
know they're probably going to get better with it, and you know, I think it's good for undergrad papers. Like if you're a student and you gotta like bang out like an undergrad paper, yeah, who really cares, man? Your
Yeah.
undergrad means nothing. You know, if you're taking a master's level course, if you're in grad school, probably don't do that because you're probably going to fail.
Hmm.
I think that's the only thing that's, uh, those things are good for. So I don't know. I wouldn't use it. I mean, I've dabbled with it with like editing, like
Yeah.
grammatical stuff, like Grammarly. But even with Grammarly, like I'll edit a whole article on Grammarly, and I'll not really look at it. And like one thing I do with editing is I read my story out loud to myself, and I'm like,
Oh,
dude, what was this? This is stupid. Like
that's a good
it doesn't
idea,
pick up
though.
the fine details.
Reading it out loud, I think, is a great idea. It's another way to really like hear it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It helps. It's only good. I wouldn't say you do that with like a whole book, but when I edit like larger projects, like my short story collection, I'm not reading my whole short story collection out loud. I just read the one short story out loud, and then I'll go back and edit. And editing's a nightmare. That's where you really become a writer, in my opinion, is with your editing,
I,
because yeah,
I once asked a Hollywood screenwriter for writing advice, and he goes, "Well, let me tell you about writing. Writing is rewriting."
I like Jordan Peele's quote. He's like, the only goal with the first draft is get it out as quickly as possible so you can start shifting through the sands of bullshit.
Yeah, that's good. That's helpful.
Yeah.
So, tell me a little bit about Dirtbag Magazine.
Dirtbag Magazine was a project I started out of anger because I was writing for a couple online publications at the time. Uh, and I got this new job. I'm not going to say who I was working for at the time, but they were a somewhat big publication, and I worked there for all of like 2 weeks. And what had happened was I was like, okay, super excited. Like, I'm not really like a journalist per se, but I write a lot of pretty decent opinion pieces, and I like to review like cool albums I like. That's what I do. I like that. Well, I kept getting these SEO, like, I had to write this stupid article. I wasn't happy about it, but hey, 150 bucks is 150 bucks sometimes. I write this article and I send it back, and it's like the super low word count, like 800 words or like 500 words, something stupid. And I was like, okay, I don't think you could write anything in 500 words and it'd be good, in my opinion. So I send it to their editor. They're like, okay, this is good. Well, we put it in our SEO algorithm, and it didn't give you a good score. So I think you need to rewrite it. And I was like, what the fuck does that even mean? I was super pissed, like absolutely livid. And I was like, okay. So I sent it back, and they're like, okay, still didn't meet this. And I was like, you know what? $150 isn't worth my pride. So I wrote this big long email basically calling them the death of journalism. I was kind of being a dick. I admit that. And I hit like reply all.
Yeah, you did.
I
Yeah.
said to like all my buddies who are working there, and they're like, dude, there's one thing about you, you know how to burn a bridge. And I was like, hell yeah, brother. I was young. I was like 28 when I did this. So then out of anger, I just went and bought a business license, created this website, had no idea what I was doing, created it like 24 hours. And then I started working and like getting my band of merry men together to create the first print of Dirtbag Magazine. And it was cool. It's like a very literary thing. It wasn't very long. We got actually some interest, like some of the big like publishers for magazines. At one point, we were going through this talks of like getting it potentially in, airports and stuff like that. They really liked our vision with it, well, my vision with it, because it was pretty much a one-man show. The only thing that I really didn't do was like the photography side of it, and I didn't do the outlines. Like someone else made the magazine because I don't know anything about computers. And then we did the second issue, and the biggest problem was the only reason I stepped away from it is like I like working at a magazine, but I don't think I'm made to run a magazine. It's really not my forte, or forta technically in the French word, but you know, it's not my thing, and it's basically a giant money pit. Lost a lot of money because I refused to sell a magazine for anything more than $9.99. I refused to sell T-shirts for anything more than $20. And I refuse to sell anything more. But it is cool. People still wear like the dirtbag shirts. Like I haven't shut it down completely. Like I want to do like one big issue, like a 100-page issue, and I might just shut it off after that, just because I don't know. I think it was just a fun little side quest, and yeah, I wish I could have done it longer, but it's expensive to run a print magazine. It doesn't make a lot of money, so that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, and it was a physical magazine, so that's
It was a
really
physical
hard.
magazine,
Yeah,
physical
that's really
magazine.
cool. I'm impressed by the ambition and the, fuck you, I'll do it
If I had
myself.
more money, like it'd be a super cool project, and I like the title. Like, I mean, it was super popular for what it was. Like, we sold like probably like 400 magazines for that was essentially ran by like two people in a laptop,
It
and
it's a great
sold out on
name.
t-shirts. Yeah, dude, it is awesome. Like I have a trade. I got it trademarked through like the U.S. Patent Office, so I own that forever.
That's
Um,
awesome.
and I have like two separate business licenses in two separate states, and like I still renew the business license. And maybe one day if I make a shit ton of money on books, it'll just be my little baby project. But right now, it's not something I can realistically keep alive. So
Yeah, I think physical print stuff is hard in this day and age, but Dirtbag magazine, man, I feel like if it was like 1999, going into early retirement.
yeah, I know. Like that's what everybody says. Everybody loves the name. Like I, yeah, I mean, I still get a lot of texts and emails about people wanting a Dirtbag Magazine T-shirt, and I'm like, maybe one day, but right now I got to focus on writing books, and I'm about to go back and finish my undergrad degree, and then life gets in the way, and if I was to win the lottery tomorrow, I'd probably hire a full staff, and I'd just be the head writer of Dirtbag Magazine,
That's cool. You said you're getting an undergrad degree, or are you getting an English degree or lit or something?
I'm actually getting international relations. So I was an international relations major. Dropped out of school to go back into the army because I got a book deal, and I changed my degree to literature halfway through my first semester, which was stupid. And then ended up getting the book deal. Went back in the army because I missed making money. And now that I'm out, I have my sweet GI Bill, and I got really nothing to do than write books. So I'm gonna finish my undergrad and then might go to grad school. Who knows? Uh, yeah,
Do
but
you
it's I want to do a grad degree in journalism actually. So
so you think you're gonna stick with writing? You don't have any other like career pivots in mind, or is writing kind of the goal from here on out?
writing is the goal. I just need yeah, books are. It takes a while to make money off books. Like realistically, I'm not going to be making a lot of money until like potentially 5 books from now. And that's if everything goes the way I want it to. So realistically, you just have to I'd like to write for like Rolling Stones one day, but you need a big boy degree to write at Rolling Stones. So
Okay, okay. So on the business side of writing books, like in 2024, for people who want to be authors, it sounds like you mentioned it, you need to have 5 books before you can expect to make money. Is it kind of like a volume game?
it is a volume game. Like it is cool. Like I mean, I get a little bit bigger book checks now than I used to because I have more than one book, and that's kind of the game. Like you write one book. If it's not absolute dog shit, hopefully it makes you get a couple good reviews. People start seeing your name. You should do a couple of articles to keep people reminding who you are, and then like you write a second book, and then you write some more articles, and more people start to read your stuff. And then by your third book, you get some new audience, and they're like, oh, well, I like this book. Let me buy his last 2 books. Then by your fifth book, you should probably be writing somewhere that could maybe get your name out there a little more, unless you have just a great absolute publisher. But this is the world of reality. So rarely ever are you ever going to write one book and it's just going to knock people's socks off and be an instant bestseller. That's not reality. It's never going to happen. So I'm hoping at one point, like I have like 5 really good books out, and I publish a sixth one, and it sells like gangbusters.
I
And
love
then
it. Hey,
people buy all the others.
I like the long-term, long game mindset.
Yeah, I mean, in all reality, writing's one of those careers that, like, unless you're writing in a whole bunch of different mediums, if you're just writing books and only books, maybe someone will know your name when you're dead.
Mm. So
I
and
want
so
to see
you
my success, so I'm trying to get everything I can. I want to write screenplays. I want to do articles. I want to do journalism. I want to do fiction. And yeah, and that's just the big game.
have you written any screenplays yet?
I wrote one, and it's sits in my bottom shelf right now. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm ever going to share it because writing screenplays is completely different than writing novels. I
Yep.
would rather
Yep.
someone else do it. I have an idea for I would like to do like a sitcom TV show, just because I miss those old style like sitcom TV shows like three best friends, living in the city and just making it through life. I miss those style of TV shows a lot, and I would like to
Mhm.
write one. Um, but it's a big project, and right now I got to focus on books. So
Yeah. I got two screenplays in my drawer as well. So
yeah, that's natural. That's what happens, man. You
yeah.
you write a screenplay, it sits in a drawer. You never show anyone.
Yeah. I'm happy that I at least finished two of them though. They're 120 pages each. You know what? It's better even if no one buys them, at least I finished them.
Yeah, there is a pride in finishing anything. Honestly, like I don't care if it's good or like when I have a buddy who like finishes like writing like a book. I'm like, dude, that's awesome. Like you should be proud of finishing a book, like no matter what. And like when I was like getting to start, like when I wrote that first screenplay, um, I read a lot of screenplays, like for my favorite movies, kind of get the idea of the format and stuff. And I kind of just realized, like, this might not be my thing. I'm too long winded.
Yeah, yeah. And screenplays are almost more like a blueprint. They say like
Yeah,
show don't tell, and there's a lot of stuff that you don't say include. Like if I can't see it on the screen, then maybe don't write it on the page. Is what I've been advised.
yeah, exactly. And like maybe one day my books are doing really well, and then I could sell a screenplay when I'm famous or something. But that's probably never gonna happen.
Yeah,
I hope it
or your fifth book or your sixth book is just so huge and popular that then the Hollywood people come to you and they'll write
yeah.
it and everything. They'll
Or you
write the
just get to be an
screenplay.
advisor and get paid to do nothing,
Yeah,
dude.
you just get to sit there in front of
Do the Mario
all the
Puzo thing. You're just sitting there with Capella and just like getting
you get
drunk. Like,
you get to sit on set and look cool and hang out with
yeah, dude.
interesting famous people.
Yeah, every male author wants to be Hank Moody just a little bit in his life. You know, I feel like every young male author, especially in your 20s, you watch a little bit too much Californication. You're sleeping with girls and you're having a good time, and then you walk, and then you just like, I'm gonna be Hank Moody one day. That's probably not gonna happen. I wish it would, but that's also a fictional TV show. So
Yeah, so many young males that watched either Californication or Entourage, and they're
yeah,
like, "I'm gonna be in the movie business. I'm gonna be a book author. This is gonna be fucking awesome. I've seen that show. That's gonna be my life."
yeah, and David Dukowski, he does have books. They're okay. I've read like a couple of his books. You could tell he got a creative writing degree, and he wants to show it off as much as he can, but he is not as good as Hank Moody is. But I do
Yeah,
like listening to his audiobooks because it's like having Hank Moody read you a book, so that's kind of
that's
fun.
pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Um, so as we start to wind down this episode, what do you wanna say to the world as we wrap up? What's your message to the world? And yeah, what do you got?
I don't even know if I have any message really for anybody. Just read better books. I think it's the best thing I can tell people. Stop reading memoirs. Stop reading these stupid nonfiction books. Pick up an old fiction book, man. Go to your local thrift store, find you a Wilbur Smith book, read some action and adventure and actually a story to escape your life, and get off your phone, man. Like stop doom scrolling on Instagram. Like it's not the best for you. And like go outside, go to a bar, talk to a beautiful woman, get rejected, have a couple pints with your buddies, and read a good book. That's all I got to say for you. And it might not be my book, you know.
I love it. I love it. And before we wrap up, do you want to share like where can people find you and what should they be on the lookout for from you next?
Uh, all right. Yeah, I'm on Instagram as just buck underscore. You could just Google me as William Bolyard. That's kind of cool. You're able to be Googled. I was pretty proud about that. Very good.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
yeah, right now I just have two books out. My most recent one is Demons in the Taillights. Pick up that or Superman's Thoughts, and be on the lookout next year for my short story collection titled A World Apart, and that'll be fun.
Amazing, man. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast. And maybe we'll catch you after your book comes out. You have to come back and tell us about it.
I'm always down to come back. I've had a great time, man. I appreciate you taking your time to do this.
I love it, man. Thanks so much. And bye, everyone.